pregnant German shepherd was chained to a tree, crying for help. What this baby did left everyone in tears. What happened next will shock you. If this story touches your heart, please like, share, and let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. The wind howled like a wounded animal, making the windows of the Carter family home shake. Rain lashed against the glass in angry bursts, as if trying to force its way inside. The small town of Willow Creek rarely saw storms this violent, and 5-year-old Noah Carter pressed his tiny hands against the cold window pane, watching the world outside turn wild. "Dinner's almost ready, Noah," Sarah called from the kitchen, her voice barely audible over the storm's rage. The warm smell of chicken pot pie filled the house, fighting against the chill that seeped through the windows. Daniel, Noah's father, folded his newspaper and smiled at his son. "Quite a storm, huh, buddy? You're not scared, are you?" Noah shook his head, his blue eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. "The trees are dancing, Daddy. They're telling stories." Daniel chuckled. Noah had always been different from other kids his age, more sensitive, more aware of the world around him. He saw magic where others saw mundane. He felt things more deeply. A flash of lightning turned the sky electric blue, followed almost instantly by a deafening crack of thunder. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. "I hope we don't lose power," Sarah sighed, placing the steaming pot pie on the dining table. "Noah, come eat before it gets—" She stopped mid-sentence. Noah wasn't listening. His small face was pressed against the window, his breath fogging the glass. His body had gone completely still. "Noah," Daniel called. "Dinner time, son." But Noah didn't move. He tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something beyond the howling wind and pounding rain. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Someone's crying." Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Daniel. "It's just the wind, sweetie. Come eat." Noah shook his head, more insistent now. "Someone's crying. Listen." Daniel got up and joined his son at the window, mostly to humor him. He placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. "I don't hear anything except the storm, buddy." And then, there it was. Between the gusts of wind and the drumming rain, a sound that didn't belong. A high-pitched whine, a plea, a cry for help. "See, Daddy? Someone's crying." Noah's voice quivered, his eyes filling with tears. "They're scared. They need help." Sarah joined them now, straining to hear. The sound came again, louder this time, more desperate. A wail that cut through the storm's fury. "Is it Mrs. Jenkins' cat again?" Sarah wondered aloud, referring to their neighbor's troublesome tabby that sometimes got stuck in trees. Noah suddenly pulled away from the window, darting to the front door. His small hands struggled with the lock. "Hurry! She's begging for help." "She?" Daniel frowned, following his son. "Noah, wait, you can't go outside in this storm." But Noah was already turning the doorknob, his little face set with determination that seemed too mature for his 5 years. "Daddy, please! She's hurt!" Daniel grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and his rain jacket from the hook. "I'll check it out. You stay inside with Mommy." Noah stomped his foot, tears now streaming down his face. "No! She needs me. I can feel it." Sarah had never seen her son so adamant, so sure of something. Noah was stubborn at times, like any child. But this was different. This was urgency. This was purpose. "Let him go with you," she told Daniel, surprising herself. "Just be careful. Both of you." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. He helped Noah into his yellow rain boots and matching raincoat. The boy looked like a tiny firefighter, ready to rescue. The moment Daniel opened the door, the wind nearly knocked them backward. Rain pelted their faces like tiny needles. Daniel held Noah's hand tightly as they stepped into the storm. "Where did you hear it coming from?" Daniel shouted over the wind. Noah didn't answer with words. Instead, he pointed toward the large oak tree that stood at the edge of their backyard, where their property met the beginning of the woods. Without waiting for his father, Noah began running toward it, his small boots splashing through puddles. "Noah, slow down!" Daniel called, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. The flashlight beam bounced wildly as Daniel ran after his son. The rain made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Noah seemed to have no such trouble, moving with the certainty of someone following a clear path. When Daniel finally caught up to Noah, the boy had stopped at the massive oak tree. Daniel's flashlight beam swept across the scene, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A dog, a German shepherd, was chained to the tree. The chain was wrapped so tightly around her neck that it had cut into her flesh, leaving raw, bleeding marks. Her golden brown fur was matted with mud and blood. But most shocking of all was her swollen belly. She was heavily pregnant, possibly days or even hours away from giving birth. The dog's eyes, amber and filled with pain, looked up at them. She whimpered, a sound so full of suffering that Daniel felt his chest tighten. Noah had already dropped to his knees beside her, uncaring of the mud soaking through his pants. His small hands hovered over the dog's head, afraid to touch and cause more pain. "It's okay," he whispered to the dog. "We're here now. We'll help you." The dog, as if understanding, tried to lift her head. The chain rattled, digging deeper into her neck. She let out another cry, the same cry that had somehow reached Noah through the walls of their home and the fury of the storm. "Who would do this?" Daniel muttered, anger rising in his chest as he knelt beside his son. The chain was secured with a heavy rusted padlock. Even if they wanted to unwind it, they couldn't without the key. "Daddy, she's gonna have babies!" Noah's voice broke with emotion. "We have to help her." The dog's breathing was labored, her sides heaving with each breath. Despite her obvious fear and pain, she made no attempt to growl or bite as Noah's small hand finally made contact, gently stroking her wet fur. Instead, she did something that made Daniel's heart skip a beat. She licked Noah's hand, a gesture of trust, a plea for mercy. "The chain's locked," Daniel said, examining the padlock. "I need to get the bolt cutters from the garage." Noah nodded, but made no move to follow his father. "I'm staying with her." "Noah, you can't stay out here in the storm." "She's scared, Daddy," Noah said simply, as if that explained everything. And somehow, it did. Daniel hesitated, then quickly removed his own rain jacket and draped it over Noah's shoulders for extra protection. "I'll be right back. Don't move." As Daniel turned to run back to the house, a movement in the trees beyond the oak caught his eye. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness. A figure, watching them. For a moment, Daniel froze, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. The shadow remained motionless for several seconds, then retreated deeper into the woods. Someone had been watching them. Someone had left this dog here, chained and suffering, and had been watching. Daniel ran back to the house faster than he'd thought possible, his mind racing. Who would do such a thing, and why leave the dog in their backyard? Was it random cruelty, or something more targeted? Sarah met him at the door, her face pale with worry. "What is it? What did you find?" "A dog," Daniel said, already moving toward the garage. "A pregnant German shepherd. Someone chained her to the oak tree. It's awful, Sarah, and I think someone was watching us from the woods." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Watching? Who?" "I don't know, but I need the bolt cutters. The dog has a chain around her neck with a padlock." Sarah's face hardened with determination. "I'll call the police." "Try, but the cell service might be out because of the storm. I need to get back to Noah." "Noah's still out there?" Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. "He wouldn't leave her. You know how he is with animals." Daniel found the bolt cutters and grabbed a blanket from the hall closet. "We need to get her inside. She looks like she might be in labor." Sarah grabbed her own rain jacket and followed Daniel. "I'm coming too." Together, they rushed back to the oak tree. The scene they found made Sarah gasp. Noah had somehow managed to position himself so that he was shielding the dog's body from the worst of the rain, despite his small size. He was whispering to her, his lips close to her ear, his small hand steadily stroking her side. "Noah," Sarah called softly, not wanting to startle the dog. Noah looked up, his face streaked with rain and tears. "Mommy, she's hurting so bad, but she's being brave." Sarah knelt beside her son, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. The dog's eyes met hers, intelligent eyes, filled with a depth of emotion that took Sarah's breath away. Despite everything she'd endured, there was still a dignity about her, a strength. Daniel positioned the bolt cutters around the chain links closest to the padlock. "This might scare her. Keep her calm." Noah nodded solemnly, continuing to stroke the dog's wet fur. "It's okay," he told her. "My daddy is going to set you free." With a powerful squeeze, Daniel cut through the chain. The sound of metal giving way was loud enough to be heard even over the storm. The dog flinched but didn't try to run or bite. Instead, she seemed to sag with relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. But the collar portion of the chain was still embedded in her neck, the links having cut into her flesh during what must have been a long period of struggling. "We need to get her to a vet," Sarah said, her voice tight with concern. "That collar needs to be removed properly." Daniel nodded, carefully wrapping the blanket around the dog's trembling body. "Can you walk, girl?" he asked gently, not sure if the dog would even understand or be able to. To his surprise, the German Shepherd struggled to her feet, swaying slightly, her pregnant belly hanging low. She took one shaky step, then another. "She's so strong," Noah whispered in awe. "But Daddy, I think she needs help." Without waiting for his parents to respond, Noah positioned himself against the dog's side, his small body acting as a support. The dog leaned against him, accepting his help. Daniel quickly moved to the dog's other side, taking most of her weight. Together, with Sarah leading the way with the flashlight, they began the slow journey back to the house. Just as they reached the halfway point, Noah suddenly gasped and pointed toward the woods. "Mommy, Daddy, someone's there!" Sarah swung the flashlight toward where Noah was pointing. For a brief moment, the beam illuminated a tall figure standing at the edge of the trees, a man in a dark coat, his face obscured by shadow. And then, like a ghost, he was gone. "Who was that?" Sarah's voice shook. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I don't know, but he's been watching us this whole time." "Why doesn't he help?" Noah asked, his innocence making the question all the more chilling. Daniel and Sarah exchanged a look over Noah's head. They both had the same terrible suspicion that the mysterious figure wasn't interested in helping, that he might, in fact, be the very person who had chained the dog to the tree in the first place. "Let's get inside," Daniel said firmly, urging them all to move faster despite the dog's condition. By the time they reached the house, the dog's breathing had become more labored, and a low moaning sound escaped her throat every few steps. "She's going into labor," Sarah realized with alarm. The stress and the cold must have triggered it. They quickly made a bed of towels and blankets in the living room, near the fireplace where it was warmest. Daniel built up the fire, while Sarah tried to call the vet again. Still no service. Noah refused to leave the dog's side, his small face serious with concern. "What's happening to her, Mommy?" Sarah knelt beside her son, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She's going to have her babies, Noah. It might be scary to watch, but it's natural." "Will it hurt her?" Noah's voice trembled. Sarah couldn't lie to him. "Yes, it will hurt, but then she'll have her puppies, and the pain will be worth it." The dog, who still had no name, looked at Noah and whined softly. Then, to everyone's surprise, she licked Noah's face, a gesture so gentle and trusting that Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "She likes you," Sarah whispered. "She trusts you." Noah nodded solemnly. "I told you she needed me." He placed his small hand on the dog's head. "Don't worry, I'll take care of you." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, in the warm glow of the fireplace, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of life and pain and hope. And somewhere in the darkness beyond their windows, a figure watched and waited, his intentions as obscure as his face had been in the shadows. The German Shepherd's body tensed suddenly, a contraction rippling through her. Noah's eyes widened in alarm, but he didn't run away. Instead, he moved closer, his hand never leaving the dog's head. "You can do it," he whispered to her. "You're the bravest dog in the whole world." And so, as the storm howled outside and a mysterious threat lurked in the shadows, the miracle of birth began in the Carter family's living room, witnessed by a little boy whose heart was big enough to hear a cry for help through walls and storm and darkness. Sarah's heart raced as she glanced nervously at the windows. The storm continued to lash against the glass, but it wasn't the weather that worried her now. Who was that man watching from the woods? And why had someone left this poor dog chained to their oak tree? "Daniel," she whispered, pulling her husband aside, while Noah continued to comfort the German Shepherd. "Do you think someone deliberately left her here? At our house specifically?" Daniel ran a hand through his wet hair, his expression troubled. "I don't know. It could be random. Maybe they just needed a tree to chain her to." But his tone suggested he didn't believe that any more than Sarah did. We should try the police again, Sarah insisted, reaching for her phone. Daniel nodded. And I'll check all the doors and windows, make sure everything's locked. As Sarah dialed, she watched Noah with the dog. Her son had always had a special way with animals, but this was different. The way he whispered to her, the way his small hands seemed to know exactly where to touch to provide comfort. It was as if they understood each other on some deeper level. Still no service, she sighed, putting the phone down. The storm had knocked out cell towers across the county, according to the last news report they had heard, before the power went out in most of Willow Creek. Their house was one of the few still with electricity, thanks to the generator Daniel had installed last year. The dog suddenly let out a louder whimper, her body tensing. Noah looked up, his eyes wide with concern. "Mommy, something's happening!" Sarah rushed back to his side, kneeling beside the makeshift bed of blankets. "It's okay, sweetheart. She's having a contraction. That means her puppies are getting ready to be born." Noah nodded solemnly, then leaned close to the dog's ear. "You can do this. I believe in you." The dog's amber eyes found Noah's blue ones, and there was such a deep connection in that look that Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. It was beautiful and somehow sacred, but also slightly unnerving, as if her 5-year-old son had stepped into a world she couldn't fully access. Daniel returned from checking the house, his expression grim. "Everything's locked up tight. I've got the baseball bat by the back door and the old hunting rifle in our closet just in case." "In case of what?" Noah asked, his innocent question hanging heavy in the air. Daniel hesitated, exchanging a look with Sarah. "In case that man we saw needs to be scared away," he finally said, choosing his words carefully. Noah seemed to accept this, turning his attention back to the dog. "She needs a name, Daddy." Daniel smiled, grateful for the change of subject. "What would you like to call her, buddy?" Noah didn't hesitate. "Luna, because we found her in the moonlight." Sarah frowned slightly. "But there's no moon tonight, Noah. It's too stormy." "There is," Noah insisted. "You just can't see it 'cause of the clouds, but it's there. She told me." Before Sarah could question this strange statement, the newly named Luna let out a sharp cry, her body convulsing. "The first puppy's coming!" Daniel exclaimed, moving quickly to grab more towels from the bathroom. Sarah had helped deliver a calf once, during a summer spent on her uncle's farm, but never puppies. She positioned herself near Luna's hindquarters while Noah stayed by her head, stroking her fur and murmuring words of encouragement. "I can see it," Sarah gasped as the first puppy began to emerge. "Noah, keep talking to her. She's doing great." Luna strained, her body tense with effort. Finally, with a slick rush, the first puppy slid into the world, tiny, wet, and encased in a translucent sack. "Is it okay?" Noah's voice quavered with concern. Sarah quickly cleared the membrane from the puppy's face, wiping its tiny nose and mouth with a clean towel. For a terrifying moment, the puppy lay still. Then, as if responding to a silent command, it twitched, opened its tiny mouth, and let out a squeak. "It's breathing!" Sarah laughed with relief. Luna tried to turn her head to see her baby, but she was too exhausted. Noah carefully lifted the puppy after Sarah showed him how to support its head, and placed it near Luna's face. The mother dog licked her newborn weakly, cleaning it further. "She's a good mama," Noah whispered. "She is," Sarah agreed, her eyes filling with tears at the beautiful scene before her. Just then, Luna tensed again. The second puppy was coming. Outside, a particularly violent gust of wind shook the house, and something, a branch perhaps, scraped against the side of the building. Or was it the sound of someone trying to look through the windows? Sarah pushed the thought away, focusing on the birth happening before her. One by one, tiny puppies entered the world. Luna's strength seemed to wane with each birth, but her determination never faltered. By the time the fourth puppy arrived, Daniel had joined Sarah in the delivery process, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he helped clean each newborn. "4 healthy puppies," he said, smiling at Noah. "You did a great job helping your mom, buddy." Noah beamed with pride, but his smile quickly faded as Luna let out a pained moan, different from her previous cries. "What's wrong with her?" he asked, his voice rising with panic. Sarah leaned in, examining Luna carefully. "There's at least one more puppy coming, but she's very tired." Luna's breathing had become shallow, her eyes glazed with exhaustion. The chain around her neck, though no longer attached to anything, was still embedded in her flesh, likely causing additional pain and restriction. "She needs help," Daniel said grimly. "Professional help. I'm going to try to drive to the vet clinic in town. Even if Dr. Harris isn't there, they might have emergency supplies we can use." "But the storm," Sarah began. "Is easing up," Daniel finished for her, nodding toward the window. Indeed, the wind had decreased from a howl to a moan, and the rain no longer lashed against the glass with the same fury. "I don't like the idea of you leaving," Sarah admitted, glancing nervously at the darkness beyond their windows. "Me neither," Daniel agreed. "But Luna needs help. We can't give her." He knelt beside Noah. "I need you to be the man of the house while I'm gone, okay? Take care of your mom and Luna." Noah nodded solemnly, his small jaw set with determination. "I will, Daddy, but hurry back." As Daniel threw on his jacket and grabbed the car keys, a movement outside caught Sarah's eye, a shadow passing swiftly by the living room window. Her breath caught in her throat. "Daniel," she whispered urgently. "I think he's out there, watching us." Daniel's face hardened. He moved to the closet and pulled out the rifle he'd mentioned earlier. "I'll keep this in the car with me. Lock all the doors behind me and don't open them for anyone but me. I'll be back as soon as I can." Sarah nodded, her throat tight with fear. As Daniel slipped out the front door, she quickly turned the deadbolt, then checked every window to make sure they were locked. Back in the living room, Luna had begun to strain again, a fifth puppy on its way. But this time, something was wrong. The dog's breathing was too rapid, too shallow, and her efforts seemed weaker. "Luna, you can do it," Noah urged, his small face pinched with worry. "Just one more push." Sarah positioned herself to help, but she could see that the puppy was struggling to emerge. Luna let out a cry of pain that made Noah flinch. "Mommy, help her," he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. Sarah took a deep breath, summoning all the calm she could muster. "I'm going to try, Noah, but I need you to keep talking to Luna. Keep her focused on your voice." As Noah whispered encouragement, Sarah very gently guided the struggling puppy. After what seemed like an eternity, the fifth puppy finally slid into the world, but unlike its siblings, it lay still and silent. "It's not moving," Noah's voice cracked. Sarah lifted the tiny body, clearing its airways and rubbing it gently with a towel to stimulate blood flow. No response. "Come on, little one," she murmured, continuing her efforts. Still nothing. "Let me try," Noah said suddenly, reaching for the puppy. Something in his tone made Sarah hand over the tiny body without argument. Noah held the puppy against his chest, close to his heart, and began to rub its back in small circles. "You have to breathe," he whispered to it. "Your mommy needs you. Your brothers and sisters need you." Sarah was about to gently take the puppy back, to spare her son the pain of failure, when a miracle happened. The tiny body twitched, then a small gasp escaped its mouth, followed by a weak cry. "Noah!" Sarah exclaimed in shock. "You did it!" Noah's face lit up with the purest joy Sarah had ever seen. He carefully placed the now breathing puppy near Luna's face. The exhausted mother dog licked her lastborn with what little strength she had left, a gesture of thanks and love. Luna's eyes found Noah's, and once again, Sarah had the distinct impression that some communication was passing between them that went beyond words. Luna weakly nudged Noah's hand, as if in gratitude. "She trusts you," Sarah whispered, her own eyes wet with tears. Outside, the storm had finally broken. The rain had stopped entirely, and the wind had died down to a gentle breeze. Through the window, Sarah could see that the clouds had parted, revealing a full moon that bathed their yard in silver light. Luna, the moon dog. Noah had named her perfectly, somehow knowing what none of them could have seen through the storm clouds. Just as Sarah was about to comment on this strange coincidence, a loud knock on the front door made her jump. "Daniel!" she called, moving cautiously toward the door. "It's me," came her husband's voice. "I've got Dr. Harris with me." Relief flooded through Sarah as she unlocked the door. Daniel entered, followed by a disheveled but smiling woman in her early 50s, Dr. Evelyn Harris, the local veterinarian. "I ran into her on the road," Daniel explained. "She was heading this way already, trying to check on some of her patients after the storm." Dr. Harris moved quickly to Luna's side, kneeling beside the exhausted dog and her 5 puppies. "Well, hello there," she said softly, running expert hands over Luna's body. "Looks like you've had quite a night. Can you help her?" Noah asked anxiously. She still has the chain around her neck. Dr. Harris's expression darkened as she examined the embedded collar. Yes, I'll need to sedate her to remove this properly. It's caused some nasty wounds. She looked up at Daniel and Sarah. Who would do such a thing? Before either of them could answer, another knock sounded at the door. Lighter this time, almost hesitant. Daniel grabbed his baseball bat, motioning for Sarah and Noah to stay back. He approached the door cautiously. Who is it? Police, came a voice from the other side. Willow Creek Sheriff's Department. Daniel opened the door to reveal a tall deputy in a rain-soaked uniform. Evening, the officer said, tipping his hat slightly. Got a call about a disturbance in this area. Everything okay here? Sarah stepped forward. We found a dog chained to the oak tree in our yard, she explained. She was pregnant and has just given birth to 5 puppies. The deputy's eyebrows rose as he peered past them to where Luna lay with her newborns. Is that right? And did you see who left her there? Daniel hesitated, then described the shadowy figure they had glimpsed watching them from the woods. The deputy nodded slowly, making notes in a small pad. We'll keep an eye out. There's been reports of dog-fighting rings in the next county over. Sometimes they dump the females once they've been bred too many times. Noah gasped, clutching Sarah's hand tightly. The very idea of Luna being used for such a purpose was horrifying. She's safe now, Sarah assured her son, though her own heart raced at the deputy's words. As the officer prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Lock up tight tonight. If whoever left that dog was involved in something illegal, they might not be too happy about losing her. With that sobering warning, he departed, leaving the family with a renewed sense of danger. Dr. Harris, who had been quietly working on Luna while they spoke to the deputy, looked up with a grim expression. I need to take her back to my clinic. These wounds are infected, and she's dangerously weak after the birth. The puppies should come too. They'll need their mother. I want to go with them, Noah said immediately, his small face set with determination. Sarah and Daniel exchanged looks. Noah, it's late, and you've had a long day, Sarah began gently. She needs me, Noah insisted, tears filling his eyes. She's scared, Mommy. I can feel it. Dr. Harris watched this exchange with interest. The clinic's only 10 minutes from here, she said, and I could use an extra pair of hands, even small ones. Luna seems to respond well to him. After a brief discussion, it was decided that they would all go. Sarah and Noah would ride with Dr. Harris in her van with Luna and the puppies, while Daniel would follow in their car. As they carefully moved Luna and her puppies to Dr. Harris's van, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She scanned the tree line, the shadows between houses, but saw nothing. Let's go quickly, she murmured to Daniel. At the veterinary clinic, Dr. Harris worked swiftly, cleaning Luna's wounds, administering antibiotics, and gently removing the embedded chain with surgical precision. Noah refused to leave Luna's side, holding her paw throughout the procedure, even though Dr. Harris had assured him that the sedation meant Luna couldn't feel anything. She knows I'm here, Noah insisted. She can hear me in her dreams. Sarah watched her son with wonder and a touch of bewilderment. He'd always been intuitive, especially with animals, but tonight had revealed a depth to his connection with living creatures that was almost uncanny. While Luna was recovering from the sedation, Dr. Harris invited them into her office. I scanned her for a microchip, she said, her expression serious. And I found one. Sarah's heart sank. Does that mean she belongs to someone? Someone who might want her back? Dr. Harris's face darkened. The information on the chip is troubling. She's registered to a man named Victor Blackwood. He has a property on the outskirts of the next county. The name doesn't sound familiar, Daniel said, frowning. It wouldn't, Dr. Harris replied grimly. He keeps to himself, but there have been rumors about that property for years. Animal Control has tried to investigate several times, but they never find anything concrete. Dogs barking at all hours, strange vehicles coming and going at night. Noah, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. The man with the blue eyes. All 3 adults turned to look at him. What man, Noah? Sarah asked, a chill running down her spine. The man who was watching us, Noah said simply. The one in the trees. He had blue eyes, really blue, like ice. Luna is afraid of him. He's the bad man who hurt her. The adults exchanged troubled glances. Noah couldn't possibly have seen the man's eye color from that distance. in the dark during a storm. Noah, honey, how do you know he had blue eyes? Sarah asked carefully. Noah just shrugged. Luna told me. Before anyone could question this strange statement further, a commotion from the recovery room caught their attention. Luna was awake, whimpering and trying to stand despite her weakness. They all rushed in to find her struggling to reach her puppies, who were nestled in a warm incubator nearby. Easy, girl, Dr. Harris soothed, gently guiding Luna back onto her bed. Your babies are right here, safe and sound. But Luna wouldn't settle. Her eyes were wide with fear, fixed on the window across the room. Noah immediately went to her, placing his small hand on her head. What's wrong? He whispered. The dog whined, pressing her body against Noah's as if seeking protection. Daniel moved to the window, peering out into the parking lot. The full moon illuminated the empty spaces, the surrounding trees casting long shadows. I don't see any, he began, then stopped abruptly. Wait, there's someone by the tree line. Sarah joined him at the window. At first, she saw nothing. Then, a movement caught her eye, a tall figure stepping out from between two pine trees, his face briefly illuminated by the moonlight before he retreated back into darkness. It's him, she whispered, her blood running cold. Noah nodded solemnly, his arm still around Luna's trembling body. The bad man with the blue eyes. He's come for Luna. I'm calling the police, Daniel said firmly, pulling out his phone. Dr. Harris moved quickly to the front of the clinic, making sure all the doors were locked. I'll turn off the exterior lights, she said. Make it harder for him to see in. Sarah pulled Noah closer to Luna, her maternal instincts in full force. Stay away from the windows, sweetheart. But Noah seemed surprisingly calm, his focus entirely on comforting the trembling dog. It's okay, he whispered to Luna. We won't let him take you. I promise. Daniel paced as he spoke with the sheriff's department, explaining the situation in tense, hushed tones. When he hung up, his expression was grim. They're sending someone, but it'll be at least 15 minutes. They're still dealing with storm damage all over town. Dr. Harris checked that the back exit was secure before rejoining them. I've got a taser in my office, she said matter-of-factly, and a baseball bat. Used to play in college. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the image of the petite veterinarian wielding a baseball bat. Their brief moment of levity was shattered by the sound of glass breaking somewhere in the front of the clinic. He's inside, Doctor, Harris whispered, her face pale but determined. She reached for a nearby cabinet, pulling out a surgical tool that looked unsettlingly like a scalpel. Daniel positioned himself between the recovery room door and his family, the weight of the baseball bat steady in his hands. Noah, get under the table with Luna, Sarah instructed, her voice barely audible. But Noah shook his head. She can't move, Mommy. She's too weak. Instead, he stood up, his small frame positioned protectively in front of the dog bed, where Luna lay with her puppies. Sarah moved to pull him back, but the look in his eyes made her pause. There was a determination there, a certainty that seemed beyond his 5 years. Footsteps echoed down the hallway outside the recovery room. Slow, deliberate steps. The sound of someone who wasn't trying to hide their presence. The doorknob turned slowly. Daniel raised the bat, his knuckles white with tension. The door opened to reveal a tall, thin man with hair as pale as winter wheat. His face was angular, all sharp edges and hollow spaces, but what struck Sarah most were his eyes. A blue so pale and clear, they seemed almost translucent, like ice over deep water. Well, he said, his voice surprisingly soft and cultured. Isn't this cozy? No one spoke. The man's gaze swept over each of them before landing on Luna. His thin lips curved into what might have been a smile, but there was no warmth in it. There you are, girl, he said. You've led me on quite a chase. Luna growled, a sound so low and threatening that Sarah barely recognized it as coming from the same gentle dog who had licked Noah's face just hours earlier. This dog belongs to you? Dr. Harris finally asked, her professional tone belied by the white-knuckled grip on her scalpel. The man nodded slightly. She does. My name is Victor Blackwood. He reached into his coat pocket, making everyone tense, but pulled out only a small leather wallet. My identification and her registration papers. Dr. Harris hesitantly took the offered wallet, examining its contents. These appear legitimate, she admitted reluctantly. Of course they are, Blackwood replied smoothly. Why wouldn't they be? Because you chained her to a tree and left her to die, Noah suddenly said, his voice surprisingly steady for a child confronting an adult. You hurt her. You're a bad man. Blackwood's pale eyes narrowed as they focused on Noah. Children should be seen and not heard, he said coldly, and you have no idea what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Noah retorted, his small chin lifting defiantly. Luna told me all about you. A flicker of something, surprise, concern, crossed Blackwood's face before his expression smoothed once more. Luna? Is that what you've named her? He chuckled, the sound as dry as autumn leaves. How quaint. What's her real name then? Sarah challenged, moving to stand beside her son. Property doesn't have names, Blackwood replied dismissively. Daniel's grip on the bat tightened. She's not property. She's a living being who you abused and abandoned. Blackwood sighed, as if dealing with particularly slow children. I didn't abandon her. She escaped during the storm. I've been tracking her all night. So you admit the chain was yours? Dr. Harris asked sharply. Do you have any idea what damage it did to her? It was embedded in her flesh. She's a working dog, Blackwood said impatiently. Sometimes discipline is necessary. Discipline? Sarah echoed in disbelief. She nearly died. She was giving birth in a thunderstorm, chained to a tree. That was unfortunate timing, Blackwood conceded, but irrelevant. She belongs to me, as do her puppies. I've come to collect them. No, Noah said simply, planting himself more firmly in front of Luna. You can't have her. For the first time, Blackwood seemed genuinely annoyed. Listen, boy. Her name is Luna now, Noah interrupted, and these are her babies, and they're staying with us. Blackwood took a step forward, his pale eyes glittering dangerously. I don't think you understand. No, sir, Daniel said, moving between Blackwood and his son. I don't think you understand. This dog was found abused and abandoned on our property. The sheriff has been notified and is on his way. If you want to claim ownership, you'll need to explain the condition we found her in. And as a veterinarian, Dr. Harris added, I'm obligated to report suspected animal abuse, which I've already done, along with documenting her injuries. Blackwood's expression hardened, but before he could respond, the sound of sirens pierced the night air. Relief washed over Sarah as flashing blue lights illuminated the parking lot. That would be the sheriff now, Daniel said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. Blackwood's face betrayed nothing as he turned his gaze back to Luna. This isn't over, he said softly. Then, to everyone's surprise, he simply turned and walked out of the recovery room, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Daniel followed cautiously, watching as Blackwood exited through the front door, just as a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the parking lot. The two men exchanged words that Daniel couldn't hear, and then, incredibly, Blackwood was allowed to leave, walking calmly to a black SUV parked beneath the trees. When the sheriff entered the clinic, Daniel confronted him immediately. Why did you let him go? Sheriff Tom Wilson, a heavy-set man with a perpetually worried expression, sighed heavily. His papers are in order, Daniel. And without clear evidence that he was the one who chained the dog. He admitted it, Daniel exploded. He called it discipline. Did he now? The sheriff's expression sharpened. That's different. If you're all willing to give statements to that effect, we can pursue charges. We are, Sarah said firmly, joining them in the hallway. That man should never be allowed near an animal again. The sheriff nodded solemnly. I'll need statements from all of you, and the vet's documentation of the dog's injuries. But I should warn you, Victor Blackwood has connections in this county, money, lawyers. We don't care, Sarah said, a fierce protectiveness in her voice that surprised even her. What he did was wrong, and we won't let him take Luna. Back in the recovery room, Noah sat beside Luna, gently stroking her fur. The puppies had begun to nurse, their tiny bodies wriggling against their mother's side. Despite her ordeal, Luna appeared more relaxed now, her amber eyes half closed in contentment as she watched her babies feed. She's feeling better, Noah announced as Sarah entered. The bad man is gone, and she knows we'll protect her. Sarah knelt beside her son, her heart swelling with pride and love. You were very brave, Noah, standing up to that man. Noah shrugged, as if confronting dangerous adults was something he did every day. I had to. Luna needed me. Dr. Harris joined them, her medical bag in hand. "Luna's a fighter," she said with approval, checking the dog's vital signs. "Her body temperature is normalizing, and her wounds aren't showing signs of further infection. The puppies are nursing well, which is an excellent sign." "Can we take them home?" Noah asked eagerly. Dr. Harris hesitated. "Luna still needs monitoring, and the puppies are very young. I'd like to keep them here for at least 24 hours. Noah's face fell. "But what if the bad man comes back?" "I'll be staying here overnight, Doctor," Harris assured him, "and the sheriff is posting a deputy outside. Luna and her puppies will be safe." "We can come back first thing in the morning," Sarah promised, seeing the worry in her son's eyes. Noah considered this, then nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but I need to say goodbye to Luna first, in private." Sarah exchanged a curious glance with Dr. Harris, but both women stepped back, giving Noah space with the dog. Noah leaned in close to Luna's ear, whispering something none of them could hear. Luna's ear twitched, and she turned her head slightly to lick Noah's cheek. The boy nodded, as if confirming something, then stood up. "She understands," he said confidently. "She'll be waiting for us tomorrow." As they prepared to leave, Sheriff Wilson pulled Daniel and Sarah aside. "I've got a deputy staying outside all night," he assured them, "but I want you folks to be careful too. Blackwood isn't the kind of man who gives up easily." "What do you know about him?" Daniel asked. The sheriff's face grew troubled. "Not enough. He moved here about 5 years ago. Bought that big property out past the county line. Keeps to himself mostly. But there have been rumors." "About dog fighting?" Sarah guessed, remembering what the deputy had mentioned earlier. Sheriff Wilson nodded grimly. "Among other things, nothing we've been able to prove. He's careful. And like I said, he has connections. Money has a way of making problems disappear in some circles." "Not this time," Daniel said firmly. "We won't let him take Luna." The sheriff clapped Daniel on the shoulder. "I believe you. Just watch your backs, okay? And keep that boy of yours close." As they drove home, the events of the night seemed to catch up with Noah. His eyelids drooped and his head nodded forward. "He's exhausted," Sarah whispered, looking back at their son from the front seat. "No wonder. He's been through so much tonight." Daniel nodded, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "We all have, but Noah, he was something else tonight, wasn't he? The way he stood up to Blackwood, the way he connected with Luna. It was almost like—" Sarah hesitated, not sure how to express what she'd been feeling all night. "Like they could communicate somehow," Daniel finished for her. "I know, I saw it too." They fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts as the car wound its way through the quiet streets of Willow Creek. The storm had passed, leaving behind a night sky washed clean of clouds, the full moon riding high. When they arrived home, Daniel carried the sleeping Noah to his bed, while Sarah checked the house, making sure all doors and windows were secure. The events of the night had left her feeling vulnerable, exposed. The idea that Blackwood knew where they lived, that he had chosen their oak tree to chain Luna to, filled her with unease. After tucking Noah in, they retreated to the kitchen, where Daniel poured them each a glass of wine. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, her voice small in the quiet house. Daniel took a sip before answering. "We fight. For Luna, for those puppies. We don't let Blackwood win." Sarah nodded, drawing strength from her husband's determination. "I've never seen Noah connect with an animal like that before. It was like they understood each other." "I know," Daniel agreed. "It was remarkable. And did you notice how he knew the man had blue eyes? There's no way he could have seen that in the dark, from that distance." "He said Luna told him," Sarah recalled, a shiver running down her spine despite the warmth of the house. "Do you think that's possible?" Daniel asked, his expression serious. "Some kind of, I don't know, animal-human connection?" Sarah might have laughed at the idea yesterday, but after everything she'd witnessed tonight, Noah hearing Luna's cries through walls and storm, the way he'd saved the 5th puppy, how he'd stood so bravely against Blackwood, she wasn't so sure anymore. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I believe Noah believes it, and that's enough for now." They finished their wine in companionable silence, the events of the night settling around them like a heavy cloak. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, dealing with Blackwood, figuring out what to do with Luna and her puppies, protecting their family. But for now, they had done all they could. As they prepared for bed, Sarah checked on Noah one last time. Her son was sleeping peacefully, his small face relaxed in slumber. She bent to kiss his forehead, then paused. Noah was whispering something in his sleep. Sarah leaned closer, trying to make out the words. "Don't worry, Luna," Noah murmured. "I won't let the bad man take you. I promise." Sarah's heart clenched with a mixture of love and concern. Even in sleep, her son was protecting the dog who had come so suddenly into their lives. She closed his door quietly and returned to her bedroom, where Daniel was already half asleep. "He's still thinking about Luna," she whispered as she slid beneath the covers, "talking to her in his dreams." Daniel pulled her close, his arm warm and secure around her waist. "Our son's a hero," he murmured sleepily, "a regular dog whisperer." Sarah smiled in the darkness, letting her husband's steady breathing lull her towards sleep. But just as she was drifting off, a sound from outside snapped her back to wakefulness. A car engine, idling briefly before going silent. She rose quietly, moving to the window that overlooked their front yard. The moonlight illuminated the empty street, the neatly trimmed lawns of their neighbors, the edge of the woods beyond. Nothing seemed out of place. Then, a movement caught her eye. A figure stepping out from between two houses across the street. Tall, thin, unmistakable even at this distance. Victor Blackwood stood in the moonlight, his pale face turned up toward their house. Even from this distance, Sarah could feel the chill of his gaze. He stood motionless for several long moments, like a statue carved from ice. Then, with deliberate slowness, he raised one hand in what might have been a wave, but felt more like a warning. A moment later, he was gone, melting back into the shadows, as if he'd never been there at all. Sarah remained at the window, her heart pounding in her chest. She thought about waking Daniel, calling the sheriff again. But what would she say? That a man had stood on a public street looking at their house? That wasn't a crime, no matter how threatening it had felt. Instead, she checked that the window was locked, then the bedroom door. She slipped back into bed beside Daniel, but sleep was a long time coming. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind outside, set her nerves jangling. Morning arrived with a brilliance that seemed at odds with the darkness of the previous night. Sunlight streamed through the windows, birds sang in the oak tree, and the storm's damage seemed minimal. A few broken branches, scattered leaves, nothing more. Noah was up earlier than usual, already dressed and waiting impatiently by the front door when Sarah came downstairs. "We need to go see Luna and her puppies," he announced, bouncing on his toes with eagerness. "I promised we'd come back." "Breakfast first," Sarah insisted, guiding him toward the kitchen. "Luna and her puppies will still be there after you've had some cereal." Noah reluctantly agreed, though he ate with such speed that Sarah feared he might choke. Daniel joined them, looking as tired as Sarah felt after their restless night. "Did you see him too?" Sarah asked quietly while Noah was occupied with his last few spoonfuls of cereal. Daniel nodded grimly. "Around 3 in the morning, standing under the oak tree, looking up at the house. I saw him across the street," Sarah whispered. "Just watching. I called Sheriff Wilson this morning. He's going to have a deputy drive by regularly, keep an eye on things." Sarah nodded, relieved but not entirely reassured. There was something about Victor Blackwood that frightened her on a primal level, a coldness, a calculation in those pale blue eyes that suggested a man capable of anything. "Can we go now?" Noah asked, pushing his empty bowl away. "Luna's waiting." They arrived at the veterinary clinic to find Dr. Harris looking exhausted but triumphant. "Luna had a good night," she reported. "Her temperature's normal, the infection in her neck wounds is responding to the antibiotics, and all 5 puppies are nursing well." Noah didn't wait for permission before rushing to the recovery room, where Luna greeted him with a thumping tail and a soft whine of welcome. The puppies were nestled against her side, 5 tiny bundles of fur in various shades of black, brown, and tan. "She's happy to see us," Noah declared, kneeling beside the dog bed. "She knew we'd come back." Dr. Harris watched the reunion with a thoughtful expression. "I've been a vet for 25 years, she said to Sarah and Daniel, "and I've never seen a bond form so quickly between a child and an animal. It's quite remarkable." "So, what happens now?" Daniel asked. "With Luna and the puppies?" Dr. Harris's expression grew serious. "Legally, it's complicated. Blackwood has paperwork showing ownership, but we have documented evidence of abuse and neglect. I've filed a report with Animal Control, and they'll be investigating. In the meantime, Luna needs a safe place to recover and raise her puppies. With us, Noah said immediately, looking up from where he sat with Luna. They're coming home with us. The adults exchanged glances. Noah, honey, it's not that simple, Sarah began gently. Yes, it is, Noah insisted. Luna wants to stay with us. She told me so. Before Sarah could respond to this, the clinic door chimed, signaling a visitor. Dr. Harris excused herself to check, while Daniel and Sarah continued their conversation with Noah. Keeping Luna and 5 puppies is a huge responsibility, Daniel explained. We need to think about... He was interrupted by Dr. Harris's return, and the person who followed her into the recovery room. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows did nothing to soften Victor Blackwood's sharp features. If anything, the daylight made him appear more unsettling, highlighting the unnatural paleness of his eyes, the bloodless quality of his thin lips. Good morning, he said, his voice as smooth and cold as polished marble. I believe we have unfinished business. Noah immediately positioned himself in front of Luna, his small body a shield between the dog and Blackwood. Luna growled softly, her amber eyes never leaving the man's face. Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Harris said, her professional tone strained with barely concealed dislike. I wasn't expecting you back so soon. Clearly, Blackwood replied dryly. He surveyed the room, taking in Noah's protective stance, the concerned expressions of Sarah and Daniel. I see the family has grown attached to my property already. Luna is not property, Noah said firmly. She's a living being with feelings. Blackwood's pale eyes narrowed slightly as they fixed on Noah. You've got quite a mouth on you, boy. Your parents should teach you better manners. Our son is expressing a legitimate opinion, Daniel said, moving to stand beside Noah. And frankly, after seeing how you treated Luna, I agree with him completely. Blackwood sighed, as if dealing with particularly difficult children. I've already explained that the dog escaped during the storm. An unfortunate situation, but hardly abuse. The chain embedded in her neck says otherwise, Dr. Harris countered, as do the numerous old scars on her body. This dog has been systematically mistreated over a long period. You have no proof I was responsible for that, Blackwood said smoothly. She could have been injured after she escaped. We saw you watching us, Sarah interjected. From the woods, you saw her chained to the tree and did nothing to help her. A flicker of annoyance crossed Blackwood's face. You have no idea what you saw in a storm, in the dark. Regardless, I've come to collect what's mine. I have the paperwork right here. He pulled a folded document from his coat pocket. Dr. Harris took it reluctantly, scanning its contents. Her expression grew troubled. This appears to be a court order, she admitted, requiring the return of the dog and her puppies to Mr. Blackwood. That's right, Blackwood said with a thin smile. Signed by Judge Reynolds this morning. He's an early riser like myself. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Judge Reynolds was known throughout the county as a hard man who followed the letter of the law and who owed his position to the support of wealthy donors like Blackwood. But the animal abuse report, Dr. Harris protested. There's an investigation pending. Which may or may not prove anything, Blackwood said dismissively. In the meantime, the dog legally belongs to me. Noah's small face had gone pale, but his jaw was set with determination. You can't have her, he said, his voice shaking slightly but still firm. I won't let you hurt her again. Something dangerous flashed in Blackwood's eyes, a cold fury quickly contained. This isn't up for debate. The law is on my side. The law can't always protect the innocent, Noah replied, a statement so mature it momentarily startled all the adults in the room. But I can... Blackwood's patience visibly thinned. Enough of this nonsense. Dr. Harris, as a licensed veterinarian, you're legally obligated to comply with this court order, unless you want to risk losing your practice. The threat hung in the air, ugly and explicit. Dr. Harris's face tightened, but she didn't immediately respond. We'll fight this, Daniel promised, placing a supportive hand on Noah's shoulder. We'll get a lawyer, challenge the order. By all means, Blackwood replied with cold amusement. In the meantime, the dog and her puppies come with me. He took a step toward Luna, and several things happened at once. Luna growled more loudly, baring her teeth despite her weakened state. Noah spread his arms wider, shielding her. And from the front of the clinic came the sound of the door opening, followed by heavy footsteps. Sheriff Wilson appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Morning, folks. Thought I might find you all here." Relief washed over Sarah. "Sheriff, this man is trying to take Luna based on a court order, but there's an animal abuse investigation." The sheriff held up a hand, stopping her. "I'm aware of the situation, Mrs. Carter. I spoke with Judge Reynolds myself about 20 minutes ago." "Then you know I have the legal right to take my dog," Blackwood said smoothly. Sheriff Wilson looked at Blackwood with undisguised dislike. "What I know, Mr. Blackwood, is that there's compelling evidence of animal cruelty. And while Judge Reynolds did sign your order, he wasn't aware of some additional information that's come to light." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Blackwood's face. "What additional information?" Instead of answering, the sheriff turned to Dr. Harris. "Doc, that microchip you found in the dog, did you scan it thoroughly?" Dr. Harris frowned. "Yes, it provided Mr. Blackwood's ownership information. Did it show anything else, like when it was implanted, or by whom?" Understanding dawned on Dr. Harris's face. "I didn't check those details. The scanner should still have the full readout." The sheriff nodded. "I'd like to see it, if you don't mind." As Dr. Harris left to retrieve the information, Blackwood's composure began to show cracks. "This is irrelevant. The court order becomes null and void if the dog wasn't legally yours to begin with," Sheriff Wilson finished for him. "Which brings me to an interesting conversation I had early this morning with Animal Control in Maplewood County." Blackwood's face hardened. "I don't see how—" "They've been investigating reports of stolen dogs in the area for months," the sheriff continued, as if Blackwood hadn't spoken. "Purebred German Shepherds specifically. Dogs that went missing from yards, homes, even a police training facility. Dogs that match the description of this one right here." Dr. Harris returned with a printout, which she handed to the sheriff. He studied it briefly, then looked up with grim satisfaction. "Well, would you look at that? This microchip was registered to the Maplewood County K-9 training program, implanted in a dog named Athena 3 years ago." He fixed Blackwood with a hard stare. "Care to explain how a police dog in training ended up as your property, Mr. Blackwood?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Blackwood's face had gone completely expressionless, a mask carved from ice. "There must be some mistake," he said finally. "I purchased this dog legally." "From whom?" Sheriff Wilson pressed. "Because according to these records, Athena, or Luna, as she's now called, disappeared from the training facility during a break-in 2 years ago, along with 4 other dogs, all female, all in their prime breeding years." Noah's eyes widened. "You stole her," he whispered. "You stole her and hurt her and made her have babies." Blackwood ignored the boy, focusing instead on the sheriff. "This is all circumstantial. You have no proof I was involved in any theft." "Maybe not yet," Sheriff Wilson agreed. "But it's enough to invalidate that court order and open a full investigation. And in the meantime, Luna stays right where she is." For a moment, Blackwood remained perfectly still, his pale eyes calculating. Then, with deliberate slowness, he straightened his coat. "This isn't over," he said softly, the words barely audible. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Noah. Something in his gaze made Sarah step protectively closer to her son. "You should teach your boy to stay out of other people's business," Blackwood said to Daniel, his tone conversational, but with an undercurrent of menace. "It's a dangerous world out there." With that, he left, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. The silence that followed was broken by Luna's whine. Noah immediately turned to comfort her, whispering reassurances that seemed to calm the dog. "Is it true?" Sarah asked the sheriff. "Luna was a police dog?" Sheriff Wilson nodded grimly. "In training, at least, and one of several stolen over the past few years. We've suspected an organized dog theft ring was operating in the area, but could never prove it." "And you think Blackwood is behind it?" Daniel asked. "I think Mr. Blackwood has a lot of questions to answer," the sheriff replied carefully. "But proving it won't be easy. He's careful, connected, the kind of man who knows how to make problems disappear." "He can't have Luna," Noah said firmly. "She's ours now." The sheriff smiled kindly at Noah. "Well, son, Legally speaking, if she was stolen, she technically belongs to the Maplewood County Training Program. Noah's face fell. But they'll just put her in a kennel. She needs a family. Let's cross that bridge when we come to it, Dr. Harris suggested. For now, Luna and her puppies still need medical care, and they're safest here at the clinic. The sheriff nodded in agreement. I'll have a deputy posted outside 24/7 until we sort this out. And I'd advise all of you to be careful. Blackwood might have left peacefully today, but men like him don't give up easily. After the sheriff left, Dr. Harris examined Luna again, checking her wounds and monitoring the puppies. She's healing well, she reported. Another day or two here, and she might be ready to go home, wherever that ends up being. Noah had been unusually quiet since Blackwood's departure, sitting beside Luna with a pensive expression. Now he looked up at his parents. Luna wants to stay with us, he said simply. She told me so. Sarah and Daniel exchanged glances. Noah's insistence that he could communicate with Luna was becoming a pattern they couldn't ignore. Honey, Sarah began gently, Luna can't actually talk to you. It's wonderful that you feel connected to her, but she doesn't use words, Noah interrupted. She uses feelings and pictures. Like right now, she's showing me her puppies growing up in our backyard, playing under the oak tree. Dr. Harris looked intrigued rather than skeptical. Noah, have you always been able to understand animals this way? Noah shrugged. Sometimes, but it's strongest with Luna. He looked back at the German shepherd who was watching him with intelligent eyes. She was trained to help people. That's why she can talk to me so clearly. She learned how to talk to humans. A police dog would be trained to communicate closely with its handler, Dr. Harris mused, to pick up on subtle cues, to form a strong bond. She chose me, Noah said with absolute certainty. She called to me through the storm because she knew I would hear her. While the adults might have been skeptical of such claims from any other child, there was something about Noah's certainty and the remarkable events of the past 24 hours that made it difficult to dismiss his words entirely. We should get home, Daniel said finally. Get some rest. It's been a long night and morning. Noah nodded reluctantly. I'll be back soon, he promised Luna, giving her a gentle hug. The dog licked his cheek, then settled back down with her puppies. The drive home was mostly silent, each of them processing the morning's events in their own way. As they pulled into their driveway, Sarah noticed Noah scanning the tree line, his eyes alert. He's not here, Noah said after a moment. The bad man. But he'll be back. Noah, Daniel said carefully, how do you know Blackwood isn't here? Can you sense him like you do with Luna? Noah shook his head. Bad people are harder to feel. But Luna would warn me if he was nearby. Inside the house, Sarah tried to establish some normalcy by suggesting lunch, but Noah's appetite seemed diminished. He picked at his sandwich, his usual enthusiasm gone. What's wrong, sweetheart? Sarah asked, concerned. Noah looked up, his blue eyes troubled. Luna's scared. She knows the bad man will try to take her away. Daniel shared a worried look with Sarah. The sheriff has a deputy watching the clinic, and Dr. Harris is there. Luna is safe. For now, Noah said, with a maturity that seemed unsettling in a 5-year-old. But the bad man doesn't follow rules. Luna knows that. The rest of the day passed uneasily. Noah was restless, frequently looking out windows, checking the phone as if expecting a call with bad news. By evening, Sarah was exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the past 24 hours. Try to get some sleep, she told Noah as she tucked him in. We'll visit Luna first thing in the morning. Noah nodded, but his eyes remained troubled. If something happens, if Luna calls for me, you have to promise to take me to her, right away. I promise, Sarah said, humoring him. But nothing's going to happen. Now, get some sleep. Despite her reassurances to Noah, Sarah found herself on edge all evening. Every shadow seemed threatening, every creak of the house a potential warning. Daniel tried to distract her with a movie, but neither of them could focus on the plot. I keep thinking about what the sheriff said, Sarah admitted as they prepared for bed, about Blackwood being the kind of man who makes problems disappear. Daniel nodded grimly. I've been thinking the same thing. That wasn't an idle threat he made to Noah. Should we call the sheriff again? Ask for a patrol car? I already did, Daniel admitted. Wilson said they're stretched thin with storm cleanup, but they'll drive by every hour or so. That night, Sleep came in fitful bursts for Sarah. Her dreams were fragmented, filled with shadowy figures and desperate barking. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, she woke suddenly, her heart racing. A sound had pulled her from sleep, not a loud noise, but something unexpected. She listened intently, trying to identify it. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Sarah slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Daniel. She moved silently down the hallway, checking first on Noah. Her son was sleeping peacefully, his small face relaxed in slumber. Reassured, she continued downstairs, checking windows and doors. Everything was secure, and yet the sense of unease persisted. She was about to return upstairs when a flicker of movement outside the living room window caught her eye. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. A shadow moved across the moonlit yard, not the shadow of a tree branch or small animal, but the distinctive silhouette of a person, tall, thin, unhurried. Sarah watched, paralyzed, as Victor Blackwood walked calmly across their lawn toward the oak tree. He stood beneath it for several long moments, looking up at the house. Then, with deliberate slowness, he placed something at the base of the tree. Sarah fumbled for her phone, intending to call the sheriff, but by the time she'd found it, Blackwood was gone, melting into the shadows at the edge of the property. Heart pounding, Sarah woke Daniel and told him what she'd seen. Together, they debated what to do. Call the sheriff? Go outside to see what Blackwood had left? Wait until morning? Their decision was made for them when the phone rang, startling them both. Daniel answered, his face growing increasingly grim as he listened. "We'll be right there," he said finally, hanging up. "What is it?" Sarah asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "That was Dr. Harris. Someone broke into the clinic. Luna and the puppies are gone." Noah appeared in the doorway, fully dressed, his face pale but determined. "I know," he said simply. "Luna called for help. We have to go now." There was no time to question how Noah could possibly know what had happened. They quickly dressed and drove to the clinic, where they found a scene of chaos. Police cars surrounded the building, their lights painting the night in flashes of red and blue. Dr. Harris stood talking to Sheriff Wilson, her face drawn with distress. "What happened?" Daniel asked as they approached. "Professional job," the sheriff said grimly. "They cut the power, disabled the alarm, tranquilized my deputy. In and out in under 10 minutes. "Where's Luna?" Noah demanded, his voice shaking with emotion. Dr. Harris knelt to his level. "I'm so sorry, Noah. They took her, and all 5 puppies." "Blackwood," Sarah said with certainty. "He was at our house less than an hour ago. He left something under the oak tree." Sheriff Wilson immediately radioed one of his deputies to check the Carter property. "If Blackwood is behind this, he's getting bolder, first threatening you directly, now this." "We need to find Luna," Noah insisted, tears streaming down his face. "The bad man will hurt her." "We're doing everything we can, son," the sheriff assured him. "I've got deputies checking all roads leading out of town, and I've contacted the state police for backup." But Noah wasn't listening. His tear-filled eyes had taken on a distant, focused look. "She's scared," he whispered. "So scared. She can't protect her babies." "Noah," Sarah said gently, putting an arm around her son's shoulders. "I know you're worried, but I can feel her," Noah insisted. "She's not far away. She's trying to tell me where she is." He closed his eyes, his small face scrunched in concentration. Trees. Lots of trees. A building made of stone. A bad smell like too many dogs all together. The adults exchanged concerned glances. Noah's distress was understandable, but this sounded like imagination fueled by fear. "Blackwood's property," Sheriff Wilson said suddenly. "It's stone-built, surrounded by forest, and if he's running a dog-fighting operation, that would explain the smell," Dr. Harris finished, looking at Noah with new respect. "Too many animals kept in poor conditions." "We need a search warrant," the sheriff said, already moving toward his car. "I'll wake up Judge Harmon. She's not in Blackwood's pocket like Reynolds." "How long will that take?" Daniel asked urgently. "A couple hours if we're lucky," the sheriff admitted, "and we'll need more than a boy's intuition to convince her." Noah's face crumpled. "Luna doesn't have hours. The bad man is going to hurt her because she ran away. She's showing me a small room. Dark. Cold." Fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. "She's trying to be brave for her puppies, but she's so scared." Sarah felt her heart breaking for her son. Whether Noah was truly sensing Luna's distress or simply projecting his own fears, his pain was real. "Sheriff," she began, not quite sure what she was asking for, but knowing they couldn't simply wait. The sheriff sighed heavily. "Look, I can drive by Blackwood's property. Legitimate welfare check after the theft. I can't enter without a warrant, but I can at least let him know we're onto him." "We're coming with you," Daniel said firmly. Sheriff Wilson looked like he wanted to argue, but something, perhaps the desperation in their faces, or the unusual nature of the situation, made him nod reluctantly. "You stay in the car," he warned. "All of you. This isn't a game, and Blackwood is dangerous." As they prepared to leave, the deputy the sheriff had sent to their property called in. "Found something under the oak tree," he reported. "Looks like a dog collar. There's blood on it." A cold weight settled in Sarah's stomach. A warning. A threat. Blackwood was sending a message. "Let's go," Daniel said grimly, lifting Noah into his arms. "We're finding Luna tonight." As they followed the sheriff's cruiser through the dark, winding roads that led to Blackwood's property, Noah sat quietly in the back seat, his eyes closed, his face set in fierce concentration. "She's still there," he whispered, "but she's running out of time." Blackwood's property loomed ahead, a sprawling estate hidden behind tall iron gates and dense forest. A long gravel driveway led to a stone mansion that seemed to grow out of the hillside itself, its windows dark and unwelcoming in the pre-dawn light. Sheriff Wilson pulled to a stop at the gates, his cruiser's headlights illuminating an intercom system mounted on a stone pillar. Daniel parked behind him, engine idling. "Remember?" the sheriff said as he approached their car window. "Stay inside no matter what happens. Blackwood is dangerous and we're on thin legal ice here." Daniel nodded grimly. "We understand." As the sheriff returned to the intercom, Noah pressed his face against the window, his eyes scanning the property beyond the gates. "Luna's inside," he whispered. "In the basement. There are other dogs, too. Lots of them." Sarah reached back to squeeze his hand. "The sheriff will help her, sweetheart." But Noah's expression remained troubled. "The bad man is awake. He's waiting." A chill ran down Sarah's spine at her son's words. Before she could respond, the gates began to swing open and the sheriff returned to his cruiser. "He's letting us in," Sheriff Wilson told them through the window. "Says he has nothing to hide. Remember? Stay in the car." They followed the sheriff's cruiser up the long driveway, gravel crunching beneath their tires. The stone mansion grew larger as they approached, its architecture imposing and cold. The front door opened as they parked, spilling yellow light onto the circular drive. Victor Blackwood stood silhouetted in the doorway, wearing a silk robe as if he'd just risen from bed, though his appearance was impeccable. "Sheriff," they heard him call, his voice carrying in the still night air. "What a surprise. Do you know what time it is?" "I'm aware of the hour, Mr. Blackwood," Sheriff Wilson replied as he exited his vehicle. "I'm here about a theft at the veterinary clinic." "How unfortunate," Blackwood said with practiced concern. "But I fail to see how that involves me. The stolen animals were the German Shepherd and her puppies, the same ones you tried to claim earlier today." Blackwood's expression remained neutral. "And you suspect me? Based on what evidence?" "Let's not play games," the sheriff said bluntly. "I have reason to believe the animals may be on your property." "Do you have a warrant?" Blackwood asked, his tone almost bored. "Not yet, but I can have one within the hour. Might save us all some trouble if you'd allow me to look around now." Blackwood smiled coldly. "By all means, Sheriff. I have nothing to hide, though I do wonder what Judge Reynolds will think of this harassment." Inside the car, Noah had gone completely still, his eyes closed as if listening to something only he could hear. "Noah," Sarah whispered, concerned by his sudden stillness. "She's moving," Noah murmured, eyes still closed. "Luna, she broke out of the cage. She's trying to get to her puppies." Daniel and Sarah exchanged worried glances. Noah's connection with Luna had been uncanny throughout this ordeal, but this seemed like a stretch, even for them. "Stay in the car," Daniel reminded them, his eyes fixed on the sheriff and Blackwood, who were now walking toward the side of the mansion. Suddenly, Noah's eyes flew open. "She's coming!" he exclaimed. "Luna's coming right now!" As if summoned by his words, a commotion erupted from around the corner of the house. Barking, shouting, the sound of breaking glass. And then, a blur of motion as Luna herself came racing across the manicured lawn, her movements hampered by her recent surgery, but driven by desperate determination. Behind her, two men in dark clothing gave chase. "Luna!" Noah cried, pulling at his seatbelt. "Noah, no!" Sarah grabbed for him, but too late. He had already unbuckled and was throwing open the car door. Luna changed direction immediately, heading straight for Noah with single-minded purpose. The pursuing men hesitated when they spotted the sheriff, but Blackwood's voice rang out sharply. "Catch that dog! Now!" What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Luna reached Noah just as the men caught up to her. One of them, tall and heavily muscled, grabbed for the dog while the other reached for Noah. Daniel was out of the car in an instant, throwing himself between his son and the men. Sheriff Wilson had drawn his weapon, shouting commands that no one seemed to hear in the chaos. And then, a sharp crack split the air, the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. Everyone froze. Luna pressed against Noah's legs, a low growl rumbling in her chest. The two men backed away, hands raised, and Blackwood stood on the mansion steps, a smoking pistol held casually in his right hand. "Enough of this circus," he said coldly. "Sheriff, control your civilians or I'll have them arrested for trespassing." Sheriff Wilson's face had gone hard as stone. "Put the weapon down, Blackwood. Now." "This is my property," Blackwood replied smoothly. "I have every right to defend it." "Not by firing a weapon with a child present," the sheriff countered, his own gun now trained on Blackwood. "Put it down. Last warning." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, with deliberate slowness, Blackwood lowered the pistol. "Take the animal if you want it so badly," he said dismissively. "It's damaged goods anyway." Noah knelt beside Luna, his arms around her neck. "Where are her puppies?" he demanded, his voice small but fierce. "What did you do with them?" Blackwood's pale eyes fixed on Noah with cold calculation. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You're lying!" Noah cried. "Luna says they're in the basement. She can hear them crying." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed Blackwood's face. It was gone almost instantly, but Sheriff Wilson caught it too. "I think we'll take a look in that basement," he said firmly. "Right now." "Not without a warrant," Blackwood replied, his composure regained. "You know the law, Sheriff." "Probable cause," Sheriff Wilson countered. "I heard puppies crying too." It was a lie, and everyone knew it. But it was enough, just barely, to justify a limited search. Blackwood's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside with exaggerated politeness. "By all means, though you'll find nothing but my wine collection." "Daniel, get Noah and Luna back in the car," the sheriff instructed. "Sarah, you too. I'll check this out." "No," Noah said firmly, surprising everyone. "Luna needs to find her babies. She can take us to them." The sheriff hesitated, torn between protocol and the strange conviction that Noah somehow knew what he was talking about. "Fine," he decided finally. "But you stay right with me, understand? And at the first sign of trouble, you're out of there." They entered the mansion, Luna leading the way with determined strides despite her injuries. The interior was as cold and unwelcoming as the exterior. All marble floors, antique furniture, and artwork that seemed chosen for value rather than taste. Luna headed straight for a door off the main hallway, pawing at it insistently. "That's my wine cellar," Blackwood said smoothly. "Nothing more." Sheriff Wilson tried the door. Locked. "Open it," he ordered. With a thin smile, Blackwood produced a key and unlocked the door, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. "As you can see," but Luna was already pushing past him, racing down the stairs with Noah close behind her. "Noah!" Sarah called in alarm, following quickly. The smell hit them first, the unmistakable odor of too many animals kept in too small a space. As Sheriff Wilson found and flipped the light switch, they all gasped. The wine cellar was actually a large underground space divided into sections. One area held cages, dozens of them, containing dogs of various breeds, all looking underfed and terrified. Another section housed what looked like a fighting ring, its floor stained dark with what could only be blood. And in a corner, in a small cage barely big enough to hold them, were Luna's 5 puppies, whimpering softly. "My God," Sheriff Wilson breathed, taking in the scene with horror. "This is a misunderstanding," Blackwood cut in smoothly. "I rescue fighting dogs, rehabilitate them." Luna was already at the cage containing her puppies, trying desperately to reach them through the bars. Noah knelt beside her, his small fingers working at the latch. "Don't touch that!" Blackwood snapped, moving toward Noah. Sheriff Wilson immediately stepped between them, his gun still drawn. "Don't even think about it, Blackwood. You're under arrest." "On what charge?" Blackwood challenged, though his confidence seemed to be faltering at last. "Animal cruelty for starters, running an illegal dog-fighting operation, theft of the Maplewood County K-9 unit, and that's just off the top of my head." As the sheriff read Blackwood his rights, Noah successfully opened the cage. The puppies tumbled out, immediately seeking their mother. Luna checked each one carefully, licking them, assuring herself they were unharmed. "They're okay," Noah announced, his face alight with relief. "They're all okay." Sarah knelt beside her son, tears streaming down her face. The scene before her, Luna reunited with her puppies, Noah watching over them all with fierce protectiveness, was both heartbreaking and beautiful. Daniel joined them, his arm going around Sarah's shoulders. "It's over," he murmured. "They're safe now." But his words came too soon. As Sheriff Wilson was handcuffing a surprisingly compliant Blackwood, the man suddenly twisted free, shoving the sheriff aside with unexpected strength. In the confusion, he lunged toward a nearby shelf, grabbing something metallic, a second gun. "Look out!" Daniel shouted, pushing Sarah and Noah behind him. Blackwood swung the weapon toward them, his pale eyes wild with fury. "You should have minded your own business," he snarled. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Luna, seeing the threat to Noah, launched herself at Blackwood with a ferocity that belied her weakened state. Her powerful jaws clamped around his arm, the force of her attack driving him backward. Blackwood howled in pain, but managed to keep his grip on the gun. He twisted, trying to aim at Luna, but she held fast, her body shielding Noah from danger. The sheriff, recovered now, drew his weapon again. "Drop it, Blackwood!" Now. But Blackwood was beyond reason. With a savage cry, he slammed the butt of his gun against Luna's head, once, twice. The dog yelped in pain, but didn't release her hold. The sheriff fired a warning shot into the ceiling. "Last chance!" In response, Blackwood swung his gun toward Noah. That was all the justification the sheriff needed. His second shot wasn't a warning. Blackwood collapsed, the bullet finding his shoulder. Luna immediately released her grip, staggering back toward Noah, her legs wobbling. "Luna!" Noah cried, rushing to her side. Blood matted the fur on her head, where Blackwood had struck her. "Mommy, she's hurt." Sarah was already pulling off her cardigan, pressing it gently against Luna's wound. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll get her help." The sheriff secured Blackwood properly this time, ignoring the man's threats and curses. "I'll call for backup in an ambulance," he said grimly, "and Dr. Harris for the dogs." Luna's breathing had become labored, her eyes struggling to stay open. She looked at Noah, giving his hand a weak lick. "Stay with me," Noah whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Luna. You're safe now. You and your puppies are safe." But Luna's eyes were beginning to glaze over, her body going limp in Noah's small arms. "No, no, no," Noah sobbed. "Mommy, help her." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Police cars and animal control vehicles filled Blackwood's driveway. EMTs took the still cursing Blackwood away in an ambulance, under police guard. And Dr. Harris arrived, immediately turning her attention to Luna. The family huddled together in the mansion's grand entryway, waiting for news. Noah refused to leave Luna's side as Dr. Harris worked on her, his small face white with fear. Finally, Dr. Harris approached them, her expression grave. "The blows to her head caused bleeding," she explained gently. Combined with her weakened state from giving birth and her previous injuries, she hesitated, clearly struggling with how to deliver the news to a 5-year-old. "Is she going to die?" Noah asked directly, his voice small but steady. Dr. Harris knelt to his level. "She's fighting very hard, Noah. But yes, her injuries are very serious. I've done everything I can here, but she needs a hospital with specialized equipment." "Then let's go," Noah cried. "Right now." "The nearest veterinary hospital with the equipment we need is 2 hours away," Dr. Harris explained gently. "And Luna may not have that long." Noah's face crumpled, but he quickly wiped away his tears with the back of his hand. "I want to see her." Dr. Harris nodded, leading him back to where Luna lay on a makeshift bed, her breathing shallow and irregular. The puppies had been placed beside her, nestling against their mother's warmth. Noah knelt beside Luna, placing his small hand on her head, carefully avoiding her injuries. "You saved me," he whispered. "You're the bravest dog in the whole world." Luna's eyes fluttered open briefly, focusing on Noah's face. With visible effort, she lifted her head just enough to lick his hand once more. "I love you," Noah said, his voice breaking. "Please don't go." Luna's amber eyes held his for a long moment, something passing between them that none of the adults could comprehend. Then, with a soft whine, she laid her head down again. Sarah moved to comfort her son, but Daniel held her back. "Let him say goodbye," he murmured, his own eyes wet with tears. Noah bent closer to Luna, whispering something in her ear that no one else could hear. The dog's tail thumped weakly against the blanket, once, twice, and then she was gone. The brave heart that had endured so much cruelty yet still found the strength to love and protect had finally stilled. Noah let out a heartbreaking cry, burying his face in Luna's fur. "No, no, no!" Sarah and Daniel rushed to his side then, enfolding their son in a protective embrace as he sobbed. "She saved my life," Noah wept, "and I couldn't save hers." "Oh, sweetheart," Sarah murmured, her own tears flowing freely. "You did save her. You freed her. You gave her love and a family. You made her last days happy ones. And she didn't die in vain," Daniel added gently. "She revealed Blackwood's operation. All those other dogs will be saved because of her, because of both of you." Noah continued to cry, his small body shaking with grief. The puppies, sensing something was wrong, began to whimper, nuzzling against their mother's still form. "What will happen to them now?" Noah asked eventually, looking at the orphaned puppies. Dr. Harris, who had been giving the family space, stepped forward. "They'll need special care," she explained. "Bottle feeding, constant attention." "We'll take them," Noah said immediately, looking up at his parents with determination through his tears. "Luna would want us to." Sarah and Daniel exchanged glances. Taking in 5 newborn puppies would be an enormous responsibility. But how could they refuse? "Of course we will," Sarah agreed softly. "We'll raise them just as Luna would have wanted." The days that followed were difficult ones. Noah refused to eat, barely spoke, and spent most of his time caring for the puppies with a dedication that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. He insisted on being involved in every aspect of their care, from preparing their formula to the middle-of-the-night feedings. "Luna would want me to take care of them," was all he would say when Sarah suggested he get some rest. News of Blackwood's arrest spread quickly through Willow Creek. The extent of his dogfighting operation stunned the community, and when the connection to the missing police dogs was confirmed, the story made national headlines. Luna was hailed as a hero, the brave dog who had escaped her captor, given birth during a storm, and ultimately sacrificed herself to bring down a criminal enterprise. But these accolades meant little to Noah, who continued to grieve silently for his lost friend. A week after Luna's death, Sarah found Noah sitting under the oak tree, staring at nothing. "The puppies are sleeping," he said as she approached. "They're getting stronger." Sarah sat beside him, pulling him close. "You're doing a wonderful job with them. Luna would be so proud." Noah nodded solemnly. "I know. Do you still feel connected to her?" Sarah asked carefully. She had been avoiding this topic, unsure how to navigate her son's belief that he could communicate with Luna. Noah was quiet for a long moment. "Not like before," he finally admitted. "But sometimes, when I'm almost asleep, I think I can feel her, checking on her puppies, checking on me." Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. She had no idea if Noah's connection with Luna had been real in some way they couldn't understand, or if it had been the power of a child's empathy and imagination. But she knew the bond had been real, regardless of its nature. "I believe you," she said simply. They sat in silence, watching as the afternoon sun filtered through the oak leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. A small sound broke the quiet, a whimper, followed by tiny yips. Noah was instantly alert. "The puppies are awake," he said, rising to his feet. As if on cue, Daniel appeared at the back door, holding a wiggling bundle of fur. "Someone was looking for you," he called to Noah. Noah rushed over, his face lighting up, as Daniel handed him the smallest of Luna's puppies, the fifth one, the runt who had needed Noah's help to take her first breath. "Hope," Noah whispered, cuddling the puppy close. He had named each of the puppies days ago, but this one, this tiny fighter, was special. Hope licked Noah's face enthusiastically, her whole body wiggling with excitement. And for the first time since Luna's death, Noah smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes. As Sarah watched her son and the puppy together, she felt something shift in the air, a sense of healing beginning, of life continuing despite loss. From inside the house came the sounds of the other puppies awakening, their playful barks and scampering feet filling the once quiet rooms with new energy. And far off in the distance, just at the edge of hearing, came a sound that might have been the wind through the trees, or might have been something else entirely. A soft, ethereal bark carried on the breeze. Noah's head lifted, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Did you hear that?" Sarah listened, but heard only the rustling leaves and the puppies inside. "Hear what, sweetheart?" Noah smiled again, a secret knowing smile. "Luna," he said simply. "She's watching over us." He turned toward the house, Hope cradled gently in his arms. "Come on, the others are waiting. We have a lot to teach them." As Sarah followed her son inside, she glanced back at the oak tree where their journey had begun on that stormy night. For just an instant, so briefly she might have imagined it, she thought she saw a shimmer of something by the trunk, a shape, golden and proud, watching over them all. Whether real or imagined, the vision brought peace to her heart. Luna's physical journey might have ended, but her legacy lived on. In the puppies who would grow up loved and protected, in the dozens of other dogs rescued from Blackwood's operation, and in a little boy who had heard a cry for help in the storm and answered with pure, unquestioning love. Hope barked again, a tiny sound full of life and promise. And somewhere, in the space between this world and whatever comes next, Luna barked back. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. Remember that every animal deserves love, respect, and protection. Sometimes the smallest among us, a dog, a puppy, a child, can show the greatest courage and teach us the most important lessons about what it means to be truly human.